And there's intimacy on the radio, and there's naturalness on the radio that can never be replicated on TV. The marvelous resurgence of radio as a political force in this country.
News-related radio programming is evolving.
There's a huge hole in our dialogue that can be filled by the synthesis of traditional radio and the freedom that comes from a live podcast. You're about to experience Cowboy State Politics live. Here we go. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to another incredible installment from very high above all the puerile and bombastic twits in the Wyoming mainstream media. This is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Studio in Sheridan, Wyoming. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. Happy Thursday. Has it sunk in yet? Have you realized that we are going to make a return to the Donald Trump presidency? That we are actually going to have a guy in office that most of us, in fact, the majority of Americans, agree with? That a guy that we think will represent the way that we look at the world. Have you realized that that's about to happen? I know it took me a while for it to all to sink in. Of course, election night, me and the lovely Christine and another guest had an election night party and an election night celebration. Actually, it was a lot of fun. But the next morning, it took a little bit for it to sink in, for us to realize that very soon, in 90 days, we'll be done with Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and the radical agenda of the American left. That American citizens finally said, we are tired of the woke nonsense. We're tired of the socialism. We are tired of the government mandates. We're tired of the executive orders that have no congressional action. We're tired of a Congress that won't do anything. We're tired of the promises that were made and that were not kept. That we're fed up, as Harriet Hageman would say, that we're fed up with all of those things. And finally, we got a result out of it. We have somebody who's going to step into the Oval Office that has already proven what he is going to do, what he is capable of doing. He's going to right the American economy, put us back to energy independence, and he's going to do away with a lot of the numerous regulations that were put on us by the Harris-Biden administration. Now, of course, we know that Joe Biden really wasn't making any of the decisions. In the end, it was publicized, and this is amazing to me, but it was in several news outlets that Joe Biden had his laptop and his phone taken away from him, from the president of the United States. Now, typically, the president can do anything that they want. You're the president, right? You tell somebody to jump, they look at you and say, how high, Mr. President? But in Joe Biden's case, they took his laptop and his phone away from him. They prevented him from going to campaign rallies. Now, I'm sure part of that, at least, was his agreement that we don't need another Republican president, and then we should do everything, at least in his opinion, that they should do everything to get Kamala Harris elected. But just think about that for a second, that they were telling his staff and the people around Kamala Harris were telling him what he can and can't do. Now, if that is not baffling to you, I don't know what is. But all of that, the cabal, the committee, whatever it is that was running this country, will come to an end in 90 days. Now, I don't want your irrational exuberance to overtake your thoughts, your intelligence, because the next 90 days is going to be a very dangerous time in America because the left has nothing to lose at this point, and they'll do pretty much anything that they want. Watching Fox News while I was doing show prep this morning, apparently the 911 attackers that we have down in Camp Gitmo are going to receive a plea deal. Can you believe that? People who were intimately involved in the 9/11 terrorist attacks are going to get a plea deal. I think that is absolutely outrageous, but it is exemplary of what and who the left is. That now that the chains are off, now that the curtain has been opened and they've been revealed for who they really are, there's nothing to stop them. And if you thought that an overwhelming landslide election of 312 electoral votes, which I'm going to talk about that here in just a second, but of over 300 electoral votes was going to send them a message and that they were going to listen and that they would do what American citizens told them to do, you're off your rocker. There's no way these radicals on the left, these Marxists, would pay any attention to that. You see, Democrats don't look at a loss that way. You know, Democrats and Republicans are very, very, very different people. That, you know, if we were handed a solid defeat in an election, we would sit back and say, well, now that's exactly what the voters wanted, and we should respect their wishes. Not the left. They don't look at losses that way. They just see it as a minor setback. They don't want to make any changes whatsoever. And really what they're doing, if you don't think that they're planning for 2028 right now, you're out of your mind. If you don't think that they're planning for 2026, you don't have any idea who these people are, because they are radicals and they have been playing the same game for a really long time. So, I mean, there is a lot to reflect on. Much of it we're going to talk about this morning. But before we get there, a couple of program notes. If you want to be part of the program today, the studio lines, I'm going to open them up here in a little bit, but the phone number is 307-374-8989. That's 307-374-8989. If you want to be part of the program, if there's something on your mind that you want to talk about, go ahead and give me a call, and I'll work some calls into the program throughout the hour. So one more time, that phone number is 307-374-8989. Also, another cool announcement. If you are a fan of Rumble, I've started a Cowboy State Politics Rumble page. So the morning show, the Cowboy State Politics Live, will be broadcast on Rumble every time we have a program. Now, if you've noticed, you know, it's not every day that I can sit down in the studio and broadcast. You know, life goes on, and my life is a little bit crazy. And so sometimes it just doesn't work out that I'm able to broadcast. But the days that I do, which is almost always 5 days a week, it'll now be broadcast on YouTube, on Facebook, on X, and now on Rumble. And if I can figure out a way to put it on Truth Social, I'm absolutely going to do that too. So the program is expanding. And speaking of the program, if you want to listen to the podcast, you can find the Cowboy State Politics podcast anywhere that you get your podcasts: iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, iTunes, TuneIn, any of them will work. All you got to do is just search for Cowboy State Politics and you'll find it. Well, we begin this morning with the New York Times. And it's an opinion piece that, I find interesting because they're still the New York Times, and they can't all at once abandon their principles and their values, if you can call what they believe principles. But there's an interesting opinion piece by Peter Baker. Now, of course, he does work at the New York Times, so he is not exactly a conservative, and you'll see that as we get into the piece. But it's entitled "Trump's America. His comeback victory signals a different kind of message." And the subtitle is, "In the end, Donald J. Trump is not the historical aberration that some thought he was, but instead a transformational force reshaping the modern United States in his own image." Now, the word populist is an interesting one, because that's what the left always tries to paint conservatives as. You are populist. What you do is you inflame the crowd, and that's how you get elected. It's a term of derision, or at least that's how the left intends it to be. That you're not really a conservative, you're a populist. You just operate on on the whims of the crowd, that you don't really have any principles. You're just operating on mob sentiment. That's how that term is meant. And while Donald Trump may have some populist leanings, I mean, it is absolutely the truth that he does have, or he used populism in his campaign, and super effectively. Another interesting point, though. So he got 73 million votes in 2020, and Biden allegedly got 81 million votes. Now, this time around, Donald Trump got 71 million, and that was a historic election, a historic turnout in an American presidential election. So what exactly was 2020? Or are you expecting all of us are going to forget about that? Just an interesting factoid. But let's go to the New York Times piece, and I quote, "In her closing rally on the Ellipse last week, Kamala Harris scorned Donald J. Trump as an outlier who did not represent America. That is not who we are," she declared. Well, in fact, it turns out that may be exactly who we are, at least most of us. The assumption that Mr. Trump, and it's now President-elect Trump, Peter Baker, represented an anomaly would at last be consigned to the ash heap of history, was washed away on Tuesday night by a red current that swept through battleground states and swept away the understanding of America long nurtured by its ruling elites in both parties. Now, Peter Baker is absolutely correct on that part, that for too long, America has been run by people who think that they are the elites. The people in the higher echelons of the Republican and Democrat Party, the people who, they go to, as Dave Kinski would say, they drink their tea with their pinkies extended. Those type of people, those folks in the ivory tower that consider that we, the little people, are only the instruments by which they regain and win every election. That's how the elites that Peter Baker is talking about view American citizens. No longer can the political establishment write off Mr. Trump as a temporary break from the long march of progress, a fluke who somehow sneaked into the White House in a quirky one-off electoral college win 8 years ago. With his comeback victory to reclaim the presidency, Mr. Trump has now established himself as a transformational force reshaping the United States in his own image. Now, a lot of what's in this piece I agree with, except the part that he's reshaping it in his own image. No, I'm afraid not. Mr. President Trump is just prosecuting his office the way that American voters want him to. If that were not the case, he would not have won this election. Now, I admit that there's the scary Kamala Harris and the American left and everything that they were doing, the Marxists, the radicals, that we certainly didn't want them in power, but that it was Donald Trump that was reelected. And by the way, we shouldn't discount the historical importance of this election. It hasn't been since Garfield ran for president that we have had a president reclaim non-consecutive terms. And that is simply president gets beat in his reelection bid and then comes back an election afterwards and gets reelected. Now, the truth is that Garfield really didn't do that great of a job his second go round. And the historians differ on why that is. Some would say that he got bored. Some would say that the country changed in those 4 years where he wasn't in the White House. But one thing is certain, that he wasn't anywhere near as effective his second term as he was his first term. But I don't think that Donald Trump in any way is reshaping America in his own image. Rather, Donald Trump is a reflection of where America is at right now. That he is a reflection of the sentiment of the vast majority of American citizens. And this is another historical point that I don't want to get lost here. It has not been since 2004 that a Republican has won both the Electoral College and the popular vote. What we have here, my friends, is a 312 electoral vote victory with winning the popular vote with over 71 million votes. That is gigantic. It is a landslide. We are definitely in Ronald Reagan 1980 territory. And the parallels from 1980 to 2024 are striking. The media in 1980, all of the polls said that Jimmy Carter was going to win. All of them. Even though Jimmy Carter had presided over the American malaise. Everybody remember his malaise speech that he gave? That he, and the media thought that he was going to get reelected. Now, compare that to what we just went through. Was America in a form of malaise? Were we looking at the guy, at the people at the top in the Oval Office with a sense of disdain? Were we looking at them with any sort of confidence whatsoever that they could tackle the challenges that were facing this country, or that this country was facing, rather? No. I mean, it is, and just think about how you felt before the election. When you thought about Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and the last 4 years, where groceries were extraordinarily more expensive, where fuel was consistently above $3 a gallon, where you had regulations being shoved down your throat, where the prospect of having to transform everything that you owned into some sort of electric nightmare. Just remember that feeling and compare that to the malaise that was felt in 1980. Now, the media back then was saying, yes, Jimmy Carter is going to be elected, and without a shadow of a doubt. Look at all of these polls. We'll compare that to Monday night or Monday afternoon. The polls were saying the same thing, that Kamala Harris was going to win, though it was becoming obvious that they couldn't hide a lot of the sentiment of the American voter. They couldn't hide behind their fictitious polls. In fact, it was Scott Jennings on CNN that said that they had been lying to Americans for a very, very long time. Now, I played this soundbite yesterday on the program. Let me see if I can pull it up for you again, because I think that it is absolutely the truth, and that it was said on CNN is another interesting point. Let's see if I've got it here. 11:06. Here we go. So just take a listen to this and remember that this is being said on CNN.
This is a mandate. Has won the national popular vote for the first time for a Republican, for the first time since 2004. This is a big deal. This isn't backing into the office. This is a mandate to do what you said you were going to do. Get the economy working again for regular working class Americans, fix immigration, try to get crime under control, try to reduce the chaos in the world. This is a mandate from the American people to do that. I think I'm interpreting the results tonight as the revenge of just the regular old working class American, the anonymous American who has been crushed, insulted, condescended to. They're not garbage. They're not Nazis. They're just regular people who get up and go to work every day and are trying to make a better life for their kids, and they feel like they have been told to just shut up when they have complained about the things that are hurting them in their own lives. I also feel like this election, as we sit here and pour over this tonight, is something of an indictment of the political information complex. I mean, we've been sitting around here for the last couple of weeks, and the story that was portrayed was not true. I mean, we were told Puerto Rico was going to change the election. Liz Cheney, Nikki Haley voters, women lying to their husbands. Before that, it was Tim Walz and the camo hats. Night after night after night, we were told all these things and gimmicks were going to somehow push Harris over the line, and we were just ignoring the fundamentals. Inflation, people feeling like that they were barely able to tread water at best. That was the fundamentals of the election. And so I think that both parties should always look at the results of an election and figure out what went right and what went wrong. But I think for all of us who cover elections and talk about elections and do this on a day-to-day basis, we have to figure out how to understand, talk to, and listen to the half of the country that rose up tonight and said, we've had enough.
Exactly right. Over half of the country stood up and said, we have had enough of the mainstream media. And just think about that for just a second. For the last 8 years, almost a decade, the media has been telling us how terrible of a person Donald Trump is, that he's a dictator, that he's going to be a tyrant, that he's a racist, that he's Hitler, that he agrees with Hitler. I mean, the list of of accusations that they threw Donald Trump's way is long and distinguished, and not a one of them landed with any sort of significance with the American voter. In fact, with everything the media was telling us, the mainstream media, the big outlets told us for 8 years that Donald Trump is going to destroy the country, and the American voter absolutely disagreed. So when we think about exactly what created the Donald Trump machine, it was the left, really. It was what they did to this country, what they have been doing to this country. And it's not just the guys in the Oval Office. It's the people in Congress, too. The Mitch McConnells. By the way, no more. We have got the Senate and the House. No more Mitch McConnell. No more Paul Ryans. Let me repeat this one more time. No more Mitch McConnell. No more Paul Ryan. No more people who were going to tell us one thing and then do exactly the opposite. Because don't forget, the first 2 years of Trump's election, his first election, we had Congress then too. And what happened? We couldn't even repeal Obamacare. So American citizens delivered a mandate Tuesday, and Donald Trump and everyone else, and Donald Trump gets it, don't get me wrong, but everyone else who considers them the elites that Peter Baker is talking about, they have to understand what we told them. Back to his piece. Populist disenchantment with the nation's direction and resentment against elites proved to be deeper and more profound than many in both parties had recognized. Mr. Trump's testosterone-driven campaign capitalized on resistance to electing the first woman president. That's absolute bullcrap. It is a narrative that was started by, I think, that Barack Obama saying, you're just being a sexist. You don't want a woman president. That's not true at all. Trump's victory was pretty much engineered by strong, intelligent women. It's not the Mark Cuban saying, there's no strong, intelligent women around Donald Trump. He doesn't even like them. He can't be around them. That is bullcrap, my friends. Quote, and while tens of millions of voters still cast ballots against Mr. Trump, he once again tapped into a sense among many others that the country they knew was slipping away, under siege economically, culturally, and demographically. To counter that, those voters ratified the return of a brash 78-year-old champion willing to upend convention and take radical action, even if it offends sensibilities or violates old standards. Any misgivings about their chosen leader were shoved to the side. And that, perhaps, is the best and probably the point of Tuesday's victory, that we elected a 78-year-old Donald Trump who is brash, who has promised radical action, who doesn't care about your sensibilities, and he's going to upend convention for the sake of the country. More when we come back. And I always forget about this lead-in, but I've got a lot of things on the chalkboard here. The blame game has started, and I led with the New York Times piece because there's a lot in the media. They're trying to explain away Donald Trump's victory, but it's not going to work. We'll come back in just a second. You are listening to Cowboy State Politics Live on the Independence Network. You're not going to find a selection of better news, entertainment, and commentary than right here on the Independence Network, with great voices like Joey Carenti from Just Blame Joey, Ken Pendergraft from The Ramble Room, Tom Kelly from Wide Right Turn, and the lovely Christine from The Hair Affair. And of course, my program, Cowboy State Politics, Wyoming's most listened to political program. Also, don't forget to check out the articles section at the website, independencenetwork.us. It's loaded with op-eds, commentary, and news from all around the Cowboy State. You can listen to the Cowboy State Politics podcast anywhere that you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, really any of them will work. But the easiest place is just to go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There you can find all of the shows, as well as any of the articles that I might bring up during the course of a program. That way, if your name is Joe Biden and you can't remember if you had your pudding today, well, I probably can't help you with that, but I can definitely tell you why you should have never ran for president. And now, back to our program. Welcome back to the program, my friends. David Iverson, Cowboy State Politics Live. Documented to be almost always right 99% of the time. A record I'm very, very proud of, my friends. And it's, I continually try to update the numbers to figure out, all right, so how much more accurate am I? And, you get to 99% and there's not much farther that you can go to get to 100% correct. And of course, I make errors just like everybody else does. So I don't really think we can go too much farther. Though I continually try to improve the program to bring you a better product. And that's what I do here at Cowboy State Politics. Now, I'm watching Fox News in the studio, as I normally do. You never know what's going to come across the Chiron to tell you about. And actually, if I ever figure out a way to pipe this TV into the board, I'm going to try to do that just so, if something happens, we can go to the news and let you listen to it. But what I find really puzzling is a lot of other news outlets, Newsmax, Real America News, they have Donald Trump at 312 electoral votes. And what that would have meant is that both Nevada and Arizona went towards Trump. And if you looked at all of the election returns, I think it's pretty clear that they are going to go there. But the question is, why has Fox News not called them yet? Trump is clearly ahead by a sizable margin in both of those states. So I don't know. It's kind of a mystery, but I think that, that Fox News has been stung with, calling elections way before they're absolutely official. So maybe that's it. But it's interesting that you got a lot of other news outlets that are saying that Donald Trump is going to have 312 electoral votes, but it's Fox News that isn't going there. And I have a couple of theories about that. It could be that there are a lot of people at the top that don't want to give Trump the credit and say, this is a Ronald Reagan election. And so wow. I mean, it's an interesting one. And when I find out the answer, I will let you know. But I've been watching this now for 2 days and they really haven't called that much. Of course, yesterday they called Alaska for Trump, which is what put him at 295. But still, why not call those two states? I mean, it's pretty clear they're going to go to Trump. So why not do it? I have no idea. Well, if you're watching on the Ditto cam on the chalkboard, top of the list is that the Democrats' blame game has started. Now, really, it started Tuesday night. We know that because Kamala Harris didn't come out and talk to her supporters for 12 hours. Now, reports are that she did call Donald Trump and concede the race sometime before she gave her 4 o'clock Eastern time speech yesterday, which, by the way, I was going to record that thing and play parts of it for you, but it was absolutely horrendous. There's no reason why we need to play that entire thing, though a lot of, I think Fox carried it, and Sean Hannity was on air when she gave that speech, and he played some of it. But there are some interesting similarities in it. And the lovely Christine sent me this little soundbite, and it's interesting because the Democrats are always using different parallels. And what I mean by that is they never really have original thoughts. And this is not just true on the national stage. It's also true in the state of Wyoming. Who could forget about Cyrus Western plagiarizing LBJ? Why he would want to do that is beyond me, but he did. And it must just be a Democrat trait that you have to plagiarize a whole bunch of stuff. And I mean, that's what derailed Joe Biden's most recent presidential election. It turned out that he had plagiarized parts of a speech by a British politician, and he dropped out of the race. So plagiarism is kind of in the genes of the Democrats, and I think a lot of it boils down to them thinking that you're too stupid, that you're so stupid that you're not going to notice what's going on. And so they just plagiarize everything they can, and they think that you're going to let them get away with it. And that couldn't be farther from the truth. However, there are some interesting parallels between Hillary's concession speech and Kamala Harris's. And go ahead and take a listen to this. It's kind of long, but it's worth a listen.
The outcome of this election is not what we wanted, not what we fought for, not what we voted for.
This is not the outcome we wanted or we worked so hard for.
Earlier today, I spoke with President-elect Trump and congratulated him on his victory. I also told him that we will help him and his team with their transition.
Last night, I congratulated Donald Trump and offered to work with him on behalf of our country.
Over the 107 days of this campaign, we have been intentional about building community and building coalitions, bringing people together from every walk of life and background.
We've spent a year and a half bringing together millions of people from every corner of our country to say with one voice that we believe that the American dream is big enough for everyone.
To the young people who are watching, it is okay to feel sad and disappointed, but please know it's going to be okay.
To the young people in particular, I hope you will hear this.
On the campaign, I would often say, when we fight, we win. But here's the thing. Sometimes the fight takes a while. That doesn't mean we won't win. This
loss hurts, but please never stop believing that fighting for what's right is worth it.
Oh, yeah. Hillary and Kamala Harris. But like I said, the Democrats really never have an original thought. They just recycle ideas from previous candidates. And we all know that Kamala Harris didn't really have anything upstairs. So there's nothing, she probably never had an original thought, which is why she always slipped perilously into her word salads. By the way, I am feeling very unburdened by what has been the last 4 years. I saw that going across Facebook all day yesterday and the day before. And in fact, election night, I looked at the lovely Christine and our nephew, and I just said, guys, I am unburdened by what has been. And it's absolutely true. But the Democrats' blame game has started. And this is from the New York Post, and I quote, Kamala Harris has been defeated. Donald Trump is headed back to the White House, and the Democrats have begun soul-searching to determine what went so wrong in a landslide that saw the party lose ground with some of its reliable constituencies. There's plenty of blame to go around, but most of the finger-pointing hasn't even been aimed at Harris, who ran a truncated campaign that was generally well-regarded before the Election Day drubbing. It wasn't well-regarded. She never said anything. Like, she was asked point blank by Brett Baer, hey, what are your policies? And the best response that she could really come up with was, I was born in a middle-class family. And on and all the time. That was her response to everything. Everything was a cliche. Everything was a talking point. There was not one thing that was specific. So I disagree with the New York Post that her campaign was well regarded. By the way, I've got another story further down in the stack of stuff that Kamala Harris raised $1 billion, and she ended up about $20 million in debt. Holy crap, that is more money than any presidential candidate has ever raised, and she still ended up $20 million in debt. That is incredible. I saw another piece that after Tuesday, or excuse me, that the week before, like the Wednesday before, she had $112 million left in the bank. So she blew that in 5 days? Holy moly. Back to the New York Post. Quote, the story might have been different if he had made a timely decision to step aside. He's talking, and this is David Axelrod talking about Joe Biden. The story might have been different if he had made a timely decision to step aside and allowed the party to move on, says David Axelrod, the strategist behind both of Barack Obama's presidential wins. The frustration with Biden, many Democrats argue, must be extended to those who enabled his bid for a second term, including members of his inner circle who shielded the 81-year-old president in physical decline. Quote, I don't believe that Joe Biden believed he was diminished, says John Morgan, a Florida attorney and Biden donor. Quote, now, who may have known he was diminished were the sycophants around him in the White House, one of whom was Kamala Harris. That the Democrats didn't have a plan to, that they didn't put forth a candidate that was better than Joe Biden or Kamala Harris before this whole thing got going is absolutely amazing. And what it says is they really thought that Joe Biden could pull it off, that he could campaign and he could make it all the way through the election, and that they would have a puppet for the next 4 years, or if they had to remove him using the 25th Amendment, then they could install the vice president in there. They were betting their election hopes. That's what they were doing. And when it became public with that debate, and I, personally, I think that was a setup, that I think that the Democrats realized that Joe Biden was not going to be able to make it all the way through the campaign. And so they said, let's go ahead and do the debate. It'll be disastrous. And then we'll go with Kamala Harris. But that they didn't begin that way, that they didn't have an actual primary, that they didn't take other competitors off the ballot, other challengers to Joe Biden off the ballot. Remember, there was that guy, I can't remember his name, but a Democrat who ran a campaign. He was taken off the ballot in North Carolina and in other states. They firmly believed that Joe Biden was going to be able to make it all the way through the presidential election. But obviously they were mistaken about that, and to disastrous results. And let's just kind of war game this out a little bit. Had the Democrats been on it and put forth a candidate, maybe Josh Shapiro in Pennsylvania, he's a Democrat and I don't agree with him, but I got to admit, he's way better than Kamala Harris. At least he has a coherent thought. That Kamala Harris didn't choose him to be vice president is even more telling. That she was playing to her radical base, who, they're anti-Semitic, pro-Palestinian base. That's why she didn't choose Josh Shapiro, because he's Jewish. And that tells you a lot about the Democrat Party, that they don't care if they're anti-Semitic if it serves their purposes. So there were a lot of pretty good candidates. I don't think they would have beaten Donald Trump, but just think about it. People that were far better than Tim Walz. Holy cow. And that goes to Kamala Harris's judgment. And there had to be people in that White House that said this is going to be a dumpster fire. And why nobody grabbed her by the arm and said, we can't do this, is another thing that's incredible. Why there wasn't somebody smart enough to look at this election and say, Donald Trump has a full head of steam. He is probably going to win the election. The only way that we're going to compete is if we have a credible candidate who is not Joe Biden or Kamala Harris. That nobody made that argument is incredible. But the frustration with Biden, many Democrats argue, must be extended to those who enabled his bid for a second term. And it's, again, there was a lot of reinforcing. There was a lot of enabling going on in the White House, and again, Biden was surrounded by some people who are to their very core radicals. So, if there was a chance that Joe Biden could make it through and win, they were going to take it. But as to the extent of Harris's loss becomes clearer, the focus on her missteps is likely to grow. Harris didn't just lose swing states. She ceded territory across the nation, including in blue states that Democrats have long taken for granted. The big blue wall that everybody was talking about is no longer blue. That blue wall went to Donald Trump. There is no more safe haven for Democrats. There is no more reliable state outside of maybe New York. But even then, Donald Trump made some significant gains in New York. He got way more votes in New York this time around than he did in the 2016 or the 2020 election. But she ceded territory, including the blue wall. Rhode Island, the party's 27-point advantage under Obama, shrunk to 21 points when Biden was the nominee and shriveled to 9 points with Harris atop the ballot. Rogue Island, a consistently Democrat state, probably all the way back to the Constitution before there was actual Democrats, it shriveled to a 9-point advantage. And that's incredible. And that's kind of the story that we saw across the country in reliably Democrat states, is the lead absolutely shrunk. Across the first wave of exit polls were manifold signs of Harris failing to match Democrats' showing 4 years earlier. Biden carried 57% of women. Harris slipped to 54%. Biden carried 55% of voters who earned less than 50 grand. Harris carried 48% of working class voters. Biden won the vote of 48% of those without a college degree. Harris claimed 44% of them. Biden won 71% voters of color. Harris won 65 of them. Voters split 49-49 on whether Biden or Trump could be trusted on the economy. Trump held a 4-point advantage on the question. Now, a Democratic strategist with deep ties to Biden's orbit says that Democrats have long known that they were weak with Latino and black men, making a decision by Harris's team to put so much focus on turning out women with appeals to protect reproductive rights a major misstep. They were pretty strong with women. Why they didn't focus on getting the male vote is absolutely, I mean, I don't know who knows the answer to that. Maybe Kamala Harris, but an absolute misstep. On the question of abortion rights, Latino voters said abortion should be legal in most cases. They backed Joe Biden, who struggled to even say the word abortion, by 63% to a 34% margin. 4 years later, Harris won by 9 percentage points on that question with Latinos. So dramatic losses with that constituency. Among black voters, Biden prevailed over Trump on the question of having abortion legal in most cases by a 94% to 6% split. This year, Harris posted a 79% to 18% advantage. It was clear in hindsight that the issue the party saw as a potent political weapon to turn out women may have also turned off men of color. Now, I mean, pretty much every time you turned on the TV, you would see something from the Kamala Harris campaign about abortion. I mean, it became overwhelming, and it was clear that they thought that was the ticket that was going to send them back to the White House. Now, while initial criticisms of Harris were fairly mild, some party strategists saw in her cautious campaign a series of strategic blunders. Here comes the blame game. She let the GOP define her, says one Democratic operative. She could have left the convention and tried to reach out to voters from across the political spectrum. But she and Tim Walz went inexplicably into hiding and didn't do interviews for weeks. Okay, so now it's the fault of the campaign staff, telling her to hide in the basement along with Joe Biden. Let's see here. Plenty of tactical choices drew second guessing. Maybe Harris should have been nicer to the brothers, as Barack Obama put it. Maybe she wasted too much money on digital ads. Lord knows she raised $1 billion and still ended up $20 million in debt. So a lot of money wasted in the campaign. Maybe she should have steered clear of lefty icons like Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, or distance herself from her boss more explicitly. Yet many had nothing but praise for Harris's polished run. I played you the Joy Reid soundbite yesterday that this was a historic and flawless campaign, implying, of course, that something other than voters elected Donald Trump. Quote, I think she ran the best campaign anyone in her position possibly could have, but that doesn't mean that she was the right person, says former Democratic Congressman Tom Malinowski of New Jersey. Quote, in hindsight, I think there's a strong argument for having an open competitive process in place to replace Biden on the ticket. You think so? You think that giving the nomination to Kamala Harris after not a single Democrat voted for her to be the nominee was a correct step? That narrative had to inflame the people that were claiming Trump was going to destroy our democracy over and over and over. The people who believe in democracy sidelined a completely democratic effort and, autocratically installed Kamala Harris as the Democrat nominee. That had to fry a lot of Democrats who are claiming that they love democracy, and but there are many more missteps here, and it's just amazing that the Democrats just can't admit that they lost, that they had a terrible candidate, that they ran a terrible campaign, and that American citizens, frankly, don't agree with it. You can listen to Cowboy State Politics live every Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. on the Independence Network. Make sure that you subscribe and follow the Cowboy State Politics podcast. You can do that from the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, or anywhere that you get your podcasts. That way, you'll make sure that you won't miss a single episode of Cowboy State Politics. Cowboy State Politics is sponsored by FreedomGoldUSA.com. They are the working man's gold company. The economy is in turmoil. The stock market pretty much is out of control, and you never know what's going to happen with your finances or your income. One way that you can shore up everything is by investing in gold and silver. Go to freedomgoldusa.com/David for a free interview to discuss your options and find out if gold or silver is right for you. One more time, that's freedomgoldusa.com/David. Cowboy State Politics, David Iverson on a Thursday after a historic Donald Trump election. Welcome back to the program. If you're just joining us, the phone number, if you want to be part of the program, is 307-374-8989. 307-374-8989. Go ahead and give me a call and tell me what's on your mind. Like I said, but if we get a call, I'll go ahead and weave it in through the program. Before the break, we were talking about the Democrat blame game that is already underway. In fact, it probably started Tuesday about 4 o'clock when it was obvious that the turnout in the election was tremendous and that the Democrats were not on the receiving end of that high voter turnout. But there's one more item that I find to be absolutely insulting that the Democrats are saying is responsible for Kamala Harris's loss, and that is misogyny. That we're all a bunch of sexists, and nobody we just didn't want a woman to be president. Yeah, that's clearly it. Because, and their argument is that, well, we didn't elect Hillary Clinton. Well, that's because she was Hillary Clinton, and she was a terrible candidate that insulted voters, just like Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris is a terrible candidate who I'm pretty sure doesn't have anything upstairs. And, maybe she missed the line when they were handing out brains or something, but Kamala Harris doesn't have anything upstairs. And that was very clear in the few interviews that she did. The only reason that she went on Brett Baer's program is to see if she could fence with him, and her staff thought that would be a great idea, but I think that hurt her. Similarly, going on the brainless, idiotic podcasts like Call Her Daddy podcast and all of that, Howard Stern, none of that helped, but those are the only types of interviews that her staff thought that she could handle because she's a terrible candidate. So the the go-to excuse for the Democrats now is that it's misogyny and we're all a bunch of sexists. And I quote, "Yet even considering world trends and economic circles, some saw in the verdict an unmistakable sign of misogyny. To this camp, it's hard to ignore that Trump has now won twice against female opponents, while losing to an old white man." Rodell Molyneux, a former senior aide to Democrat Senator Harry Reid, oh, Harry Reid, who could forget that guy, notes that despite his overwhelming victory, Trump was an unpopular candidate himself. The results speak for themselves, that there is no question that Trump is and has been the most popular candidate, perhaps in the last 50 years, perhaps more than that. I mean, I don't know that, and it's for me, and this is a tough question for me, being a historian. I have a list of my favorite presidents. George Washington is on the top of that list, not because he was the first president, because he is the standard by which everyone else ought to be measured. The father of our country, the guy who won the American Revolution. In my mind, you can't get much better than George Washington. And the only thing that we could probably do is aspire to be like him. Next up, I don't know, number 2 on my list, probably Thomas Jefferson, even though I think he was kind of liberal. There's Abraham Lincoln. John Adams has got to be in there. Ronald Reagan is there. And perhaps number 5 on my list is Donald Trump. But it is a close race between he and Ronald Reagan. Now, my pals in the Republican Party, they would be, I'm sure their jaws would be on the ground if they heard me say, I think that Donald Trump might be more popular than Ronald Reagan. But it's true. Look at the electoral vote count. Look at the popular vote. Obviously, there's a competitive race there. Now, I mean, I guess it's all going to depend on what Donald Trump does in his second term, if we can, put him on par with Reagan. But he's on his way for sure. And I always say, when you're, perhaps this is a piece of advice, as a historian, I don't think that you can judge a presidency or the effects of a presidency until you've had some years to reflect on it. Because a lot of the things that presidents do, you don't feel the effects of those until several years later. And so, it's you got to have some perspective on it. You got to have a frame of reference. You have to have something to compare them to. So I don't think that we're going to truly feel the effects of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris for a couple of years. And maybe it'll be when things improve, when Donald Trump has had a chance to work and get some of his policies in there and reverse some of the disastrous things that the Harris administration has done. But you got to take some perspective. But I don't think that any of it really has anything to do with misogyny. I don't think that there was a voter that said, I just can't vote for her because she's a woman. I think in this election, I think the voters were very intentional with how they voted. That, it was a somber choice. It was, perhaps for some, it was a difficult choice. But I heard a lot of Democrats similarly, and this kind of parallels what happened after Barack Obama's first term. I was living in Virginia at the time, and I remember, and the area I was in was very Democratic. I know. I should have done some more research before I moved there. But anyway, I heard a lot of Democrats say, I've never voted for a Republican before, but I'm not voting for Barack Obama. And I'm pretty sure you had the same phenomenon happen in this election, just because most people voted with their pocketbooks. The question of, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? And the answer to that is a definitive no. I know a lot of people that shuttered their business under Joe Biden simply because of his policies, because taxes are too high, that the regulations that were being put on business, they just couldn't operate. Now, thankfully, we have Donald Trump in the White, or soon we'll have him in the White House. And so maybe those people will open their businesses back up. I'm pretty excited to be starting a business with the lovely Christine. And, right when Trump becomes president. So that ought to be a pretty good gauge of how things go. But the last part of this article I think is interesting. And let me just read it to you. And we were talking about is misogyny, right? So Democrat Donald Trump won his 2 elections, both of which were against women. So obviously he's a misogynist. And now the next claim is they picked him over a black woman, Molyneux says, and he's the Democratic strategist. This is a tough pill to swallow. So not only are voters sexist, now they're racist. But they're forgetting that Barack Obama was elected twice, and in both of them pretty overwhelmingly. So I don't think you could say that the American voter is racist at all. And I don't think that you can call them misogynist. But here's the next point. It's a point not lost on Biden's shrinking circle of defenders. Quote, everyone who destroyed Biden and pushed him out got the race they demanded, says Democratic State Committee member in Pennsylvania. There was a choice. The only person that ever beat Trump or a gigantic unknown. So there you have it. The blame game is started, and I'm sure it's not going to end there. And it's, again, when you have an election loss, you have to take stock of why it is that you lost that election. Are there some things that you could have done differently? Are there some better arguments that you could have made? All of that. But I think that what this election should tell Democrats is that their insane obsession with this woke ideology, with LGBTQ stuff, with all the transgender nonsense that men can become women and women can become men and men in women's sports, and their insane insistence that we should be able to kill babies. I think that is wearing thin. And I just think that American voters looked at the last 4 years and said, we need to go in a different direction. That if we stay on this path, we are inevitably going to destroy the country. And I think that I'm pretty comfortable making that claim. But anyway, so moving on. Now, Bill Barr was one of the harshest critics of Donald Trump. And he was the guy that was all in favor of prosecuting him. And Trump is a really, really bad person, and we got to get him out of there. Bill Barr turned out to be a redcoat in the truest sense of the term. And so, it's amazing. He's out now saying we should drop all the prosecutions. So anyway, let's go to a caller. Let's talk to Jerry Jackson in Rock Springs. We haven't talked to him for a couple days. Hey, Jerry, how's it going?
Hello. It's going really good. I mean, really good. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, man. What'd you think of that election?
Yeah, I was worried, but I was hopeful, and I am blessed with the outcome, and I'm so proud of Wyoming and the support from everybody that loves our republic.
Yeah, man. Election night, I've been talking about it all morning, but we were watching all the returns, elections and debates. That's kind of a big thing for me and Christine. And we both looked at each other and just said, we are very, very blessed. Thank you, God. I mean, it's I'm overjoyed with the election.
And about the misogyny.
Yeah.
I don't think it carries any wind at all. For one thing, I haven't seen a woman beat so bad outside of this election other than when the men competed against women in the Olympics.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
And another thing, a good friend of mine that's no longer with us, he got me into politics more than I ever dreamed of. And I think about him every time I'm concerned. But Christians and conservatives tend to go to sleep when the Republicans are in charge. And I pray that never happens again. He told me this right after Ronald Reagan was president. And we lived 40 years of that.
Yeah, absolutely right. And I think one of the biggest mistakes that conservatives made is in Donald Trump's election. We thought, all right, he's elected, now we're good. And we just kind of went about our daily lives and we stopped fighting. And the Democrats don't do that. They keep fighting. They don't consider a loss a loss. They just keep planning and keep fighting, and they're working towards the next election.
That's right. That's right. And the communists and the Marxists and the rhinos, they have all been exposed, and we can't forget that. We got to stay awake toward that.
Yes, we do, Jerry. And that is a perfect place to end today's program. I've got about 30 seconds left. Thanks for calling, Jerry, and we'll talk to you again on the program. But for now, from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Studio, I'm David Iverson, and this is the one and only Cowboy State Politics.
Hi everyone, this is John from Zoom, and I'm here to talk to you about using the Q2N 4K in webcam mode. The Q2N 4K's webcam mode is ideal for video chatting in applications like Skype and live streaming to Facebook or YouTube. To use the Q2N 4K as a webcam, first connect a micro USB cable from the camera to your computer. Power on the Q2N 4K, then select the FOV button to highlight the webcam option, and press the record button to select it. Once the device is connected to your computer in webcam mode, it will be available to select in your software. For more information on the Q2N 4K, please go to zoom-na.com.